Hello, it's BlockchainBrad or Brad Laurie, and today I have a very special guest with me. His name is Leemo, and he has a lot of experience in recent years in the blockchain domain. Leemo, thank you very much, mate, for being here.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Likewise, mate. Now, you have a lot of experience, as I said, in many different areas. So let's start with that, Leemo. Chief Nice Officer, if I read it correctly, for Nova Wallet. Just to cap a few things, you've also doing some cool stuff with, how do you pronounce it? AIRA, Robonomics.
Just Robonomics.
Okay, yeah. Robonomics. A big one here, co-founder of ChaosDAO, counsel for HydroDX and BSX Finance, and YouTuber experience. Plus, the big one we want to talk about, or the two big points, is OpenGov. You're very much very knowledgeable about that, and also you have a lot of experience in the ChaosDAO as a co-founder, as we said. So we're going to be talking about those things. But is there anything you want to touch on first in that list that you are really passionate about?
Yeah, I guess we can talk about how I got started in Polkadot, I guess.
Okay.
So it's a funny story. It was during COVID, kind of lonely, stuck in my apartment, as a lot of people were, on a New Year's Eve 2020. And I was like, oh, like I need a hobby, I need something else to do apart from playing video games. So I was like, oh, that Bitcoin thing, I've heard a lot about that. So literally, I had no idea that the market was like going up, and I was like, "Oh, this seems to be going pretty well." I was like, "I've heard of Ethereum before and like Reddit and stuff like that." So I was like, "Okay, let's try and figure out what's going on in this crypto thing." Literally, just looked at CoinGecko at the top 10 coins, saw Polkadot, read a bit about it, and I was like, "Oh, it seems pretty awesome." And then dived into trying to buy some, trying to get a wallet, trying to stake, all that kind of good stuff. Found out it was atrocious with Polkadot.js.
It's true.
So I started it was awful. And I was making like World of Warcraft videos at the time. So I was like, oh, I could just make some videos about crypto maybe, and like explain this process, because it was not clear and I could not find videos about it. So yeah, made a lot of videos about Polkadot.js. Then got in some community groups, learned that there was like this crowd loans thing, and I was like a bit confused by it. So researched that, showed people how that would work on Rococo, I believe it was. And just started making videos, started shitposting on Twitter. And just started kind of making connections with people like Alice and Bob, who a lot of people know, Jay as well. Like us three were making content, we were making very similar content without really knowing each other, which was kind of interesting. And then, just started being active in the community, helping people, especially with Polkadot.js.
Well, just interrupt there, if it's okay. You are well known for being a helper. I think that's a good way to describe you. And coming in at the time you did with the new wave of content creators and helpers and builders, especially in the community sense, congratulations for all you've achieved thus far. You are well known. So in the different circles I have been talking to coming back, everyone seems to know your name. So to recap, you have done some of the educational content. I had a look at that, and you're also very much entrenched in the Polkadot sphere now with all that list of credentials that you have. So congratulations on all you've achieved. But let's get into a little bit more of the educator side in terms of what you've done. Now, where's your big focus? Obviously Nova Wallet's a big part. You want to improve technology access to Polkadot itself. So where does the education come in your role, and what exactly do you do?
Yeah, so for Nova Wallet, or what the company is, Novasama Technologies, I focus on like content marketing, community, all that kind of stuff. So for that job, I mainly do all of that. So there's things like videos explaining how to use certain dApps, making sure the wiki's up to date, making sure if the community has any questions, like answering those questions. And then was kind of lucky that Mr. Anton, my boss, when OpenGov came out, I was like, this is awesome. I need to spend a bit of time like understanding it properly. And he allowed me the time to do that, which I'm grateful for. And now we focus a lot on that. Nova Wallet has OpenGov as like one of its main focuses. It's one of the main tabs at the bottom of the wallet. So the team believes it's like very important. I believe it's very important. So it's pretty cool that I'm allowed to like that. Not that I'm allowed, that I'm I can spend some time educating people about OpenGov and answering questions and stuff like that. It's pretty awesome.
It is awesome, and you definitely know a lot about it, and we're going to get into that today, specifically with OpenGov. But before we do, you've sort of touched upon the question I was going to ask you about why Polkadot, but let's touch on the other parts of the sort of overall architecture of Parity and the Web3 Foundation, because you are involved there. So where do you fit in there? Are you having conversations with those parties? What do they do currently, given that we are moving more towards a decentralized frame, literally even with those organizations or those parts of Polkadot?
Yeah, so in terms of like Parity and Web3 Foundation, like Nova, we've moved to Berlin. So we're currently using the like common area of the Parity office in Berlin because it's available. So I've like met a lot of Parity people through that, and they're all really nice, to be honest. And then, for example, you've probably seen on AAG, I'm like in the Parity London office sometimes. That's just because it's an open office. So instead of being in this little small room all day, every day. Like once or twice a week, I go there and hang out with those guys and just co-work and stuff. So it's pretty nice. In terms of like I guess the decentralization stuff, there, I've always said Parity is a really good engineering company, right? I think they're probably the best engineering company in crypto in terms of like what they've done in Ethereum with that like client implementation and stuff like that. And then what they've done at Polkadot, I think, is pretty groundbreaking. And a lot of the community, I guess, always had issues with like the marketing side and stuff like that. So that's a part that's been decentralized. And I think that can bring some like renewed energy to all of that stuff and really kind of kick it off properly. Same as like business development and stuff like that. I think the people that were very good at it, I don't see them having issues continuing with it. But opening it up to more people, I think, can be a really good benefit. And yeah, Parity is going to still continue being the engineering team, and then Web3 Foundation is going to continue being absolutely awesome as they always are.
Absolutely. And it does seem that they have their own structures, even when it comes to payments and how they employee systems. Very well organized, very clear, very finite. And then we see, as you mentioned, the marketing movement coming now with the very exciting move that OpenGov is bringing. So let's talk about that. OpenGov is literally on, I think it's the buzzword right now in Polkadot for many reasons, perhaps some controversy as well. But what essentially is it? You know, you're one of the key advocates for it. You're one of the key educators. But if you had to describe to someone who doesn't know anything about it, what is it?
OpenGov is the like the ultimate stakeholder governance model. It's completely different to like a lot of other blockchains, where they might have like a foundation or a developer team or like a set of validators that can just basically veto stuff. That doesn't exist in Polkadot. It's stake-based, right? So a lot of people call it like a plutocracy, and then get really annoyed that it's not democratic. It's never been democratic. It's token-based voting. So the more stake you have, the more say you have. And it just allows you to propose anything, right? You can propose spends, which is what most people are doing, but you can also propose runtime upgrades, and all that kind of good stuff, and everything in between, which is pretty sweet. And the way I describe it is like everybody is the constituent, so the token holder, right? You can vote on stuff. You're the MP, so you can propose stuff, right? You can propose changes to the law, right? And you're also the lobbyist, which is the part that people get really annoyed about. But it's very obvious. If you want something to pass or fail, well, you can just say on Twitter, like, I think this shouldn't pass because this person's a scammer, or this is a terrible waste of money, or this guy's really awesome. Like, he's produced a lot of good work in the past, or this team has. Why don't we give them like more money to keep working, right? So you're literally like everything in like a normal kind of democratic system, those three things. But it's stake based, which is where most people get annoyed.
Right. So just to clarify a few things for those who may not know. So basically, someone who has a large stake or has a large holding of DOT, for example, given this is about Polkadot OpenGov, they have arguably a great opportunity to have a considerable voice, a considerable effect, let's say, on OpenGov. Is that right so far?
Yeah.
Okay, so given that, that's where that comment you made about plutocracy could come in. Was never designed to be a perfect democracy, not that they exist. But obviously from that, it's brought a lot of controversy with the different roles each person can play, whether they're the direct actor, whether they're submitting proposals, whether they're commenting on proposals, whether they're staking and having a vote, putting their skin in the game, as it's said. So there's many different things going on, but in terms of being decentralized, let's talk about that. So it is a governance system. It is designed quite differently to anything we've seen in the past. So how does it set itself apart from, let's say, other ecos and other chains?
So, for example, on Ethereum, you can propose stuff on their like governance forum, right? Like EIPs and stuff. But at the end of the day, as far as I understand it, the Ethereum Foundation has to basically give you the green light, and then the validators have to give you the green light as well. And there's a lot of coordination there, right? Some other ecosystems, I believe it's like Avalanche and Solana, like don't have governance or something. It's like really strange. Or like I think Avalanche's one's very limited. Cosmos has a similar structure, kind of, where you can kind of propose whatever you want and people can vote on it. But the way they handle vote distribution is very strange. So in Polkadot, when you stake, you nominate your dot to a validator, right? And you get your rewards. It's the same in Cosmos, but in Cosmos, that validator can vote with your tokens as well, right? So then the validators have like the ultimate say in everything, which might be good for some people. I'm sure the validators really like that. But if you're a very wide ranging ecosystem with people all the way from like the really techie people or the validators, all the way to like content creators or just normal community people that aren't really making content or anything, but they're just holders, right? It kind of dilutes what they can do, right? It kind of dilutes their say. Whereas if it's like supposed to be a big decentralized ecosystem with many participants, you're going to have a lot of different opinions. And I think giving the validators the ultimate say is not what I'd say is best, but I know a lot of people disagree with me on that.
Right. It does allude to a quasi-centralized system, or at the very least, it does suggest that those parties who are the smaller participants don't perhaps get heard as much. And that's just an observation thing based on what you're saying. Now, you've mentioned things like the Web3 Foundation and Parity, clarified what they do. How do they differ in their agenda, do you think, to this new marketing push that we see that's now emerging with the OpenGov, phenomenon?
Yeah, so I think people at Parity are planning some kind of structure. I think Evan from Parity, who's the social media manager, mentioned this on AAG. So they're looking at making, and forgive me, Evan, if I'm slightly wrong, some kind of board of people where they will set some direction, and then there'll be like another set of people that will like check submissions. But the goal is to open up like submissions to like social media and stuff to like quite a lot of people, so you can like submit. We think Polkadot should tweet about data availability if that's like a massive thing, right? Here's like a draft, somebody reviews it, and then it gets published, right? Whereas Web3 Foundation, as far as I'm aware, not involved in that process. Obviously, Web3 Foundation is the issuer of the dot token, but I believe all the social media stuff and like engineering is
through Parity,
kind of delegated to Parity, and engineering is also the fellowship as well, right?
Right. That's really interesting because now, as I mentioned before, we're seeing a marketing push from other parties. And we can mention one. He's well known. He's doxed himself. His name is Giotto. He is a major dot holder, and he has a very specific agenda. And it is, I would argue, purely marketing, in its design and its plan and in its future. So given that Parity has its clear objectives, it wants to be tech-centric in many ways, but is making these compromises indirectly by, the nature of OpenGov. What are your thoughts on this shift we see now in attention? Not so much shift in, the value of technology, but a lot of time and effort and focus is now going on to the marketing aspects of this because of people like Giotto. What are your thoughts on this as you see it unfold?
Yeah, so I think Gav said this in his Kusamarian interview. The OpenGov must be kind of good because there's all these like emergent voting systems. So for example, Giotto's system is, I think I said it in his group, it's like a monarchy. And some people are like, oh, this group's not democratic. Yeah, it's not, because it's one person with all the votes that you're just trying to get the attention of and get them to vote for you, right? Like if you're in Dubai, for example, which is the monarchy, if you're really close with the Sheikh of Dubai, you can probably like talk to him like, hey, I want this law passed or some tax break or something like that, right? So and a lot of people get this wrong on Twitter. So like that, the GOTAs group, the Autonomous Marketing Initiative, that's not like the overall Polkadot marketing strategy, right? That's like one guy and his tokens deciding he's making his own structure on how he will vote with his tokens, right? So somebody else that had a large amount of tokens that maybe had different views on marketing could do exactly the same, right? They could open a group and be like, this is my kind of philosophy on this. You come and talk to me and we'll decide how to vote, right?
Well, Leemo, let me jump in there and let's talk about that. So far, we haven't seen that many challenges to the Giotto effect because he is such a major dot holder. You know, he has a very significant effect. But you're alluding to something really important that many people are now seeing unfold. That Dolphin Analytics is showing this as well with their data being revealed. That quite simply, there are, you know, some very significant dot holders, some from the very earliest times, coming forth now to make a statement in their own right, with their own voice and their own agenda. And we see a sense of parity, you know, in there as well, in meaning that there is a technology focus, perhaps in some of their voting going on. So do you see that? Do you think that's a healthy thing that's emerging now, where, as you said, Giotto is just one of many?
Yeah, I do think so. This isn't like a brand new thing. Like this happened on Kusama as well. So it's like you have somebody that pushes a lot of stuff through, somebody comes and like nays everything, and then somebody else comes who has more voting power, and then somebody else comes who has more voting power. And everybody has their own agenda on things that they think should be the focus. And one thing that's important to clarify as well, because I think I've seen the Dolphin post about some of the big nay voters as well. Individual people that might work for Parity or Web3 Foundation, they're allowed to vote with their tokens. Like that's their own personal stash of DOT or KSM, right? If it's like somebody from Parity votes nay on your proposal, that doesn't mean like Parity Technologies GmbH is voting nay on your proposal, right? And a lot of these people are in the ecosystem, right? They see what's going on. And for example, with a lot of the marketing stuff, it was like the volume of referenda, and there was some, I'd say, like lack of transparency with who was getting paid.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that.
Prompted people to vote nay. Yeah, I think that just prompted people like, hey, this can be better, right? We can handle this a bit better. I'm sure they probably spoke to Giotto as well, I would imagine, because he's changed how he's handling things. And yes. I think the new way of handling things from Giotto is a lot better.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about those commissions as well. But we also see changes in policy from Giotto, and I would imagine that'll be commonplace among many large stakeholders, because nothing's set in stone, and this is a evolutionary process. But we certainly have seen some major changes happen very rapidly in the space of a month or a few months. And again, that's adding to the fuel of excitement and controversy. So let's talk about things like the challenges that you see right now with OpenGov, because they're obviously there with some of the things we're discussing, and the controversy itself. And even perhaps we could go so far as to say maybe some flaws that we need to redress. So what are some of the things you think could be improved, given that we see that some people could really take a strong position here and lead out a campaign? Others are sort of pushing back with their own independent agenda, regardless of whether they're involved with parity or not. What are your thoughts on some of these challenging aspects of OpenGov?
I feel like a lot of people that have negative sentiment about OpenGov is maybe because they don't have a large enough amount of DOT where they feel like they can make a difference when they vote, right? And I think one way to improve the system is to just have like a lot of voting groups, like ChaosDAO, like 20 of them, and they can have like their own internal mechanisms and stuff. And the individual token holders can like delegate to them, right? So for example, the Kusamarian is going to do this. So their viewers, hopefully, the plan is they will delegate to the Kusamarian, because the volume of referenda is just way too much for the average person, right? So if you're just a person that holds stock that wants to stake it and any staking rewards and stuff, but you maybe understand that you probably should vote in OpenGov because it can determine the fate of the network and all the things that means. Yeah, you're not going to review 100 proposals a week and have really review them and understand everything. So I think that way forward is really good, and then just making tools to make it easier to get involved. Like I know I work for Nova Wallet, but if you're not using Nova Wallet to vote, it's like really not that great in my opinion. So
well,
yeah,
I'll make sure
the
I put a
challenges
link.
mainly just come from Wales.
Right. Well, we can talk about that a bit more, but I'll put the link in the description for Nova Wallet, so it's a bit of a plug for you. But as you said, you mentioned Wales. No worries. So Wales, obviously, that's a challenge in itself because they have such a major sort of position in the voting game. But we also see some other controversies that have been unfolding all the way back with the Kusama days, or even more recently, we see the likes of Rich and KC getting involved. We see Giotto with his past being an ICO advisor, being the co-founder of Jure. His role in those as a marketing specialist, comes to the fore right now in his leading role in pushing this marketing.ami position. So these are all adding to the sort of the controversy of the day. Are there any solutions you think that could improve the overall understanding or lack thereof from the community when they make these comments on X, for example, or when there's misunderstandings? What solutions can you think of that might clarify how OpenGov is actually meant to be and what it's designed for?
For me, it's just like kind of obvious that like when you have, if I have 1 dot and you have 10 dot, you have 10 times the number of votes as me, right? Like I think that's easy to understand. People just get, I think in every governance system that's ever existed, if you feel like you're not being heard, you don't like it, and then you might try and have like a revolution or something, right? So you see it with like dictators and stuff, right? There'll be a dictator and all his friends like take all the country's resources and stuff, and people get really annoyed. And then like if enough people get annoyed, there's a revolution, right? In OpenGov, like, so it is based on how much dot you have, but it is possible for the average person, the average token holder, to collect size and go at it as like a team, like ChaosDAO has. Because then you feel like your vote has a bit more say, which is just the thing that people get annoyed about. And then people propose changes to the system, like quadratic voting, which I don't think will work. I think it wouldn't even get implemented. Or like a reputation-based system, which I don't think can work for a 1 million person DAO. I think OpenGov is a really, really good system. People just, because most people, I imagine, live in a democracy or, well, dependent, right? But they think a democracy is the ultimate system. And then when OpenGov is not a democracy, they get really annoyed because they feel like I'm person A and who's them, and then there's person B who's Giotto. They feel like they should have the same say in some system.
Right.
But that's not the case in crypto. That's not the case in OpenGov. So they get really annoyed about that. But I see a lot of people complaining, and then I'm hoping they're voting as well. I'm hoping they actually have dot and are not just constant trolling. And if they do have dot and they really care about it, they should really try and do what we've done at ChaosDAO to get a group of people together. You can achieve like so much more as a group than you kind of learn. Like it's ridiculous how big the difference is.
And we're definitely going to talk. We're definitely going to dig into ChaosDAO because you are a co-founder. But I wanted to ask you on that note about the possibility, or even something that could devolve into bias and collusion and coalitions that perhaps may not always be as benign as we want to acknowledge, because sometimes you can have by proxy through all those different delegates, through all those different parties that may emerge as several DAOs. What if they collude together for their own interests? Could that happen? Are we at risk of that?
Yeah, it could happen. I know the concept of vote trading has been thrown around a lot. So, for example, that's why like, again, I'll just mention how we do it at ChaosDAO. We set the system up specifically so that each person is one vote. So it was made that way specifically so people don't DM me and like try and stress me out to vote one way. But there are in every system. So, for example, I'll get this slightly wrong, I know, but like in the US, you will have like the debt ceiling needs to be increased, right? Every year or two, there's this like big drama. Oh my God, the debt ceiling is like about to be hit, and then the US is gonna like default or something like that. And if one party controls one part of the democratic system there, and then another party controls the one that's currently in government has to make some deals with the other part of the government to be able to the both agree to increase the debt ceiling, right? So that's the concept of vote trading that's being pushed around a lot in Polkadot. So you might have, for example, just like random example, if Giotto really wants to push marketing, and Ivy, for example, seems very against marketing. I don't think they've.
And just for the viewers, Ivy's another major stakeholder, another major whale, essentially a delegate, should I say?
Yeah, they're like a voting block, and people delegate their voting power to them. So, for example, Giotto might say to Ivy, "Hey, you have voted aye on this referendum. I don't really care about that referendum, to be honest. If you want me not to vote no, you have to vote aye on this other referendum, right?" And I don't really know how you overcome that unless you design your system in a way to avoid that.
Well, the question here would be, if that does evolve, and let's say that's happening now, even behind closed doors, which is quite possible, wouldn't it be better to be transparent, given that the blockchain's transparent, given OpenGov is transparent by design, and beautifully so, I would argue, being someone who's submitted a proposal and been successful? Would it be better if we opened up this trading system, if it evolved to something where people knew? Would that be more palatable, do you think?
I think so. It depends on the individual people doing it and how anonymous they want to be. It depends on
It's a tough one.
For me, I'm all about that. But yeah, some people that might have large holdings or large voting power, the way they conduct how they vote and how they come to consensus is a lot more hidden, and there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes going on which probably they don't want people to know about.
Right. And even
for me, I'm all for transparency.
Likewise, and even looking into voter trading, there are some trade-offs there, arguably with regard to potential bias, just by the sheer political nature of it. It'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. We're already seeing coalitions emerge now, which is slightly different. It's just simply supporting each other. I would imagine ChaosDAO are doing that or plan to do that and align with those who have common interest. Obviously, the due diligence is done there. And what does seem to set ChaosDAO apart is that it is that one for one. You know, not so much aligned, like the same model as OpenGov itself, where it is determined by your voting power according to your stake. It is literally you have a single voice, but it is equal to everyone else. Is that right?
Yeah. So I think there's like 350 people in ChaosDAO. So how it works is there's a lot of people that just join and then lurk, right? And they just read what the chat says. If you're like reasonably active and seem to care about blockchain governance, the people in the DAO like vote to promote you to the role where you can vote in our OpenGov forums. And yeah, it's one person is one vote. Everything's anonymous, so I don't know if somebody else has voted aye or nay. That's by design as well, because we didn't used to do that, and then people would like DM people and stuff. On like I think it was like one occasion where that happened, but it was enough that we're like, yeah, okay, we need to make it anonymous. And yeah, like in terms of like the coalition stuff, that's where like what I've been pushing for on Twitter since like 1 year ago is my pinned tweet, is there needs to be like 10 or 20 different ChaosDAOs that have all different internal voting mechanisms, different invite mechanisms, different promotion mechanisms, so that, for example, because I'll use you as the example, maybe people would vote nay on a BlockchainBrad proposal, right, in ChaosDAO for whatever reason, right? Maybe it's like literally not based on the merit, it's based on some personal agenda or something, right?
Right.
That shouldn't be the deciding vote in OpenGov. So if it's one group, if it's ChaosDAO or whoever that has this like personal bias, there should be like 10 plus more groups with like very similar size that just like counter that vote completely. So if there's, I believe if there's more people that have like some skin in the game that really do actually care about Polkadot, it cancels out potential like bad acting, right?
Or
Is my
bias.
goal. It's not the goal. Yeah. The goal isn't that ChaosDAO has all the voting power and like we control it and we're like some mafia. At least for me. The goal is to like empower the community to vote. So an example with this one person, one vote system, right? So I think we have like 2 million or something like that. It fluctuates all the time. So there might be people in ChaosDAO that don't have a lot of dot, maybe because they're from a country that's less economically developed, right? But in ChaosDAO, their vote is like, let's say 1% of 2 million dot, right? So now they have like agency over like quite a big say in the network.
Right.
So then they actually care and they actually like review stuff and give their inputs.
And that's what sets you
empowers the
apart.
community.
Sorry to interrupt, but that's what seems to set you apart from that other Giotto effect scenario where we see that he can dominate in his sort of agenda through the .ami, and that's fine. You know, as you explained, he's representing the monarchy that he is, or he's the monarch of the monarchy, but it is only one part of a bigger system called Polkadot OpenGov. So perhaps, you know, it's fair to say, Leemo, that this will evolve, not a case of should or could or would, but will, in that it's going to be a default effect of the current infancy of OpenGov in Polkadot.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see how the landscape is in 1 year, to see if there is more groups that come, to see if there is more individuals that come out that have large token holdings. The best scenario for me is if all the little guys banded together and use that in like a system like ChaosDAO uses.
Right.
I think that would be amazing. It just takes coordination. And hopefully there's tools like the ChaosDAO bot that enables the community to actually do that.
Right. Well, thank you for clarifying that. We'll touch more on the ChaosDAO in a later part of the interview, but I want to go back to influencers for a second. Now, that word influencer already has a negative connotation throughout X and throughout crypto, but it also can be a real boon depending on who is representing any eco. We see now a big push through the proposals that are emerging and that are being read through that transparent model of OpenGov. We can see controversial names come up. I won't mention any. You can mention them if you'd like, but we certainly see that some have different reputations, let's say that, in the continuum of quality. What are your thoughts on this sudden influx of proposals? What are your thoughts on this influence-centric marketing-led strategy that we're seeing come forth? And what are your thoughts on this idea, perhaps, that some of it is price-centric, price-focused, as opposed to what we're used to in Polkadot for years, which is tech first?
Yeah, so a lot of people are very anti-paying for this stuff, right? A lot of people in ChaosDAO, a lot of people in the community in general are. So I'll use Giotto's idea as an example. So Giotto is very high level, right? He has a plan that's very high level and an end goal, right? A lot of the negativity towards his plan is the road to get there, right? So there's a lot of people in the community who are very like low level, as in like they're in the day-to-day dealings of Polkadot, the community. They know everybody by name, they've met them at events and stuff. And they might say this person is not a good person to fund. This person is. But the goal with the marketing stuff, as far as I can see, is just to see if paying a few big influencers has any positive impact. I think it's very obvious that if you see one of these big influencers pushing like Solana, for example, why are they pushing Solana? Ask yourself that, right? That it's either because they have a real load of Solana or the Solana Foundation's paid them to do the content, right?
Well,
so
just to jump in, having been in this space since 2017, knowing some of those key influencers that we don't need to name, it's very unlikely that many of them have a large stake. It is possible, given that they're very wealthy now. We fast forward to 2023, 24, moving into that, but it is less likely given what we've seen. So on that basis, let's talk about and open up the conversation to those other ecos, because you mentioned Solana. Often we see covert payments. We see a very covert system. OpenGov cannot be that, will never be that, because it is not designed that way. And so that adds a layer of controversy in itself, because we can read them in real time. We can read those submissions. So does that compromise in any way Polkadot, given that we now see a transparent paid model for influencers that we've never really seen before?
Yeah, so I think it compromises could compromise like the influencer as well. So it makes it very obvious that this person just gets paid to promote a certain coin as well.
Right. So is that a good thing that we now get to see the fee structures and everything that's laid out there?
For me, I think it's good. I think it's very eye-opening. But then there could be some negativity, right? So for example, if again, we'll try not to say names, if one influencer gets paid through OpenGov, it's very obvious that they're being paid because they have to say who they are and all this kind of stuff. Then if they talk about Polkadot, if people in their community that watch them know about the OpenGov vote, it's, oh, they're just talking about it because they got paid to talk about it, right? But then I would imagine it would open their eyes to this person's talking about whatever other ecosystems token, and be like, oh, maybe they got paid by them and just didn't disclose it, right?
Right. Well, that's the exciting thing, is it's the transparency of the overall picture of that influencer's past is coming to the fore, and it helps people, I guess, get a better insight into how many of these promotion systems do work for different chains. But if we focus on Polkadot for a second, because obviously that's the agenda, and that's the purpose of the interview, is that we see now the emergence of this transparency. We see influencers coming through, but we also really want to maintain arguably the tech first, the integrity of all the work that's been done by the original founders. So how do you balance this, seeing this emerge, seeing all these influencers come forth, when we are staunch about that utility, that token being that utility, that driving force? Polkadot's done a lot of work to make sure that the SEC understands exactly what the mechanics are. Are we compromising anything by bringing this agenda in that we've seen in other ecosystems, where again, it's really focusing on that price through one very specific angle, coming from Giotto as an example, where it is that marketing gear, very staunch about trying to uplift the outcomes, if let's just say that as a very nebulous term, but we see a price centrism sort of focus. And does that challenge the status quo of Polkadot? Is that going to compromise even the token itself as the non-security that it is right now?
Well, a lot of the securities law, as I understand it, and I'm not a lawyer, so it's not legal advice, is when it's like one party doing a lot of the legwork, be that doing all the engineering stuff, then doing all the marketing stuff, that becomes an issue because it's like the efforts of one party is like controlling everything. So then it's like, yeah, this is their company, basically, right? With OpenGov, it's like anybody can propose anything. So I don't know if it would impact the status as not a security.
Maybe it's something, Leemo, we could come back to in round 2 for another interview, when we can ask some of those questions, because I think a lot of people are wondering that now, because as you said, is that there is different agenda emerging from different groups, and understanding the effects of that. For example, with Parity listening in, it makes me wonder what some of those key technologists and developers are thinking about some of these sort of drives forward in that sense. But we are seeing effects right now, let's say that, in real time, and I imagine that will continue. So that's exciting a lot of people in the community who want that outcome.
Giotto's stance on it, he's reasonably transparent in the group, right? So his stance is, and really not financial advice or anything at all, is Polkadot is where it is now in terms of the rankings and stuff, with zero marketing. So his experiment, I think he's literally called it that, is if we do this marketing stuff, very clearly a lot of the other ecosystems are doing, do we benefit from it, right? We might not, right? I don't have a crystal ball. So let's say we don't, then I imagine all of this would stop because it clearly doesn't work.
Right. Well,
how I understand it.
I have heard you comment about that in one of the AAGs, I think it was, but the empirical evidence suggests otherwise. And we've seen that in other ecosystems where marketing has a real effect, influence has a real effect. But I remember pushing back with Josh and asking him about the quality of the content as well. And he made the point that at the end of the day, the onus is on that creator. That content creator must adhere to their own, jurisdictional rules, and follow what is required according to the rules of content creation in their region. And that does make sense. That resonates even with me. I would make sure that I'm following the rules for my own country, and hopefully those who of other places do the same. But it is incumbent, I think, even on people like Giotto to at least acknowledge the kind of compromise that some may be making if they go in the direction where they mention price, for example, because that's not something that Polkadot's ever been used to, as I understood and I still understand. The focus is always technology first. But let's dig into agencies for a second as a complete shift. Now, right now, as we've mentioned before, Giotto has made some policy changes quite significantly and posted those very transparently. But one of the things that came up was this push for agencies to lead out some of that influence and that content. Specifically right now, as I understand, it's those who are less than 100,000 subscribers, the idea is to merge into an agency, and those who have substantial influence to go directly onto OpenGov and submit their proposal. Now, he's an advocate for 10 to 20% commissions. He's now suggesting not to do split wallets so that they're directly traceable on the blockchain for those commissions. And he's also advocating for very specific agencies. Now, I know that's a lot, but why is he doing that? Why is he, do you think, pushing for this agenda of agencies? Is there some sort of alignment of interest? Is there some sort of coalition going on? Are there beneficiaries that he knows? In the ChaosDAO, are there people doing this? Let's get real about it. And what are your thoughts on commissions and agencies as part of this push in the marketing program?
Yeah, in terms of the commission stuff, I know a lot of people were very against it. And I can tell you the reason why. So imagine you are a YouTube influencer or a crypto channel, whatever, and somebody comes to you, and I imagine this might be how it goes, is, hey, do you want a lot of money to make content about Polkadot? Yeah, great. Well, I'll put the proposal in for you. You just have to sign some Polk Assembly thing to verify your ID, and then this guy will vote for you, right? And I think it led to a lot of spam, and a lot of content proposals were very similar, right? I think I wasn't the only person to notice that. So it brought up a lot of questions as to the effort that's being put in as well. I think
you're being very, very polite. Let's just open this up. So we saw people like KC or Claudio, as I know him. He is now doxed in doing this with poker markets as one. Let's just open this up. We saw a lot of controversy about it. It was hidden at first and it came to the fore. And that was just one example. There were others that came forth. So huge controversy, rightly so. So please continue on. I just want to bring that up.
Yeah, so there was a lot of people that, for example, had some concerns that the content that would be made under the direction of KC, for example, might not be the best, right? A lot of people have criticized his work before and getting some facts incorrect. So there was a lot of concerns there. And it just led to a lot of spam referendums, right? Because the volume was just ridiculous, because the sell to the influencers, it's a very easy sell. Put in zero effort, basically. Just say you will do this, make a few videos, you get a lot of money, right? Whereas now the agency thing, it would be as far as I understand it, one referendum for the agency that covers all of the people that they represent, potentially. I don't know how that would work. And then it's just one, they deal with it, and it's less annoying for people. I think there's 4 agencies that Giotto mentioned. I think one of them's called Lunar Strategy, and then there's a few others.
Yes, I want to ask you more about that, because my concern when I see that instantly is what are some of the interconnections between different parties, even when it comes to media, whether even ChaosDAO, for example. If we really break it down, there can be real concerns in the community, valid perhaps right now, given that we're in the infancy of this agency-led sort of idea, whether or not some of those could be the beneficiaries and the parties that are sort of essentially profiteering or profiting from this idea and this agency, and could that lead to a direct bias? Because let's say, for example, someone from the ChaosDAO who, is part of a system where you vote on those proposals, let's say they're profiting from an agency that for every proposal they're getting commission. So there's already concerns. I've raised this before, we've discussed this, but let's open that up to the public. Is there potential here for a misuse of power through agencies? And even Jota, for example, could he be indirectly sort of advocating for benefits with people he knows or that he supports?
Yes, I think we spoke about this before. And this doesn't relate to ChaosDAO. We can go into that in a sec. For example, if your friend has a referendum up and it's like pretty mid, you're like, it's all right, it's not the best, but not the worst. And this might be a question to the audience as well, is would you more likely vote aye on it if you were like dead 50-50? Would you be swayed to vote aye if it's your friend, right? And this leads into ChaosDAO, for example. So I'm part of Nova Wallet, and Nova Wallet gets funded by the Treasury. We always, every 6 months or so, we go for Treasury funding.
Right.
So in ChaosDAO, because I'm not the ultimate beneficiary, but I get paid by Nova Wallet. So when the vote comes up, there's a recuse setting, recuse option. So it's like, if it's obvious that you're the beneficiary, you have to press that. And if there's no vote that's recused, it's obvious you haven't done that. And there is a lot of scrutiny. And I'm talking just about ChaosDAO here. So even for the Nova Wallet stuff, which a lot of people agree is good because it's normally 90% aye. There's a lot of questions like, how are you going to self-sustainability? How are you doing this, right? And probably the thing that you're talking about is, I can't remember what it's called, but there's a referendum where Crane, who's a member of ChaosDAO and part of the Kusamarian.
Yes, it was a media. I think it was a media. I can't remember the name either, but I remember the one.
Yeah, so they've reached out to some creator or influencer, whatever you want to call them, and they are acting as the agency there. That it's very obvious that it's them because the name's on the proposal and stuff.
Yeah, they didn't hide it in any way. They couldn't, or maybe perhaps they could have, but I respected they didn't. But it certainly raised the question then of potential conflict of interest or bias, which I'm obviously going to talk more about now.
Yeah, so in ChaosDAO, there was a lot of back and forth between all this agency stuff. I mean, you're in it. There was a discussion about I think there was a channel made about do we do this as a group? And the consensus was no, we probably shouldn't do this as ChaosDAO. But individual members like Crane or Tycho, they can it's up to them, right? They can, OpenGov's a fully open system. You can propose whatever you want. And just because the member of ChaosDAO doesn't mean that the referendum is related to ChaosDAO. But I get your point. It's people generally are not very good at stating their biases or their conflicts of interest across the world in every sector, right? So it's really hard to say that people don't act with bias. I know personally I don't, and the ChaosDAO vote, for example, was not 100% aye, Crane and Tycho's referendum, let's vote aye on it. Same as for example, we get a lot of pushback on Twitter saying the Kusamarian and ChaosDAO are the same thing. No, Jay is in ChaosDAO, he has been for a while, but he gets a lot of pushback as well. For example, a lot of not a lot, but some members, when there's a Kusamarian proposal, they criticize the cost, right? The expense for some people. And I think we normally do come to a good consensus, but I think it's almost unavoidable in any system, not just ChaosDAO's one or OpenGov, in any system where if you have the onus of controlling some pot of money, that you won't be slightly biased, or that people in general might not tend towards some bias. If you have a company, this happens in a load of countries and stuff, right? You have a company and you're the director of it, and there is somebody else who has another company, that's like maybe your customer, if they have like a son and that son is like pretty competent but needs a job, like you might like try and give them a job, right? It's a career favor, right? I'm not saying that's happening in ChaosDAO at
No.
all, but across OpenGov, across everything, it's really hard to find those biases and those conflicts of interest.
Yes.
And
I
then
think
sometimes it looks like there is a bias as well when there might not be.
Yes, and I think you raised one very important point, and there is that pushback from the ChaosDAO. Many people who are not privy to that knowledge would not know. I certainly don't, because I'm not involved in the voting part yet. But thank you for disclosing that. But I think also it's very important. Let's push a little bit more on this, because yes, bias can be inherent based on inter-network association. We see, for example, Kusamarian is a media front. They really lead out the narrative for all of the good work that's being done, but they also do have direct connections in terms of association, colleagues. You know, there's direct alignment there, but they are not, as you said, tied directly. But perhaps just, you know, with the evolution of the Kusamarian being involved so much with the ChaosDAO as individual members. So what I wanted to sort of push on was that, yes, there is a difference between the ChaosDAO, the entity, and then the individuals, as you've mentioned many times on X. But because they are members, and because they are voting for the most part, and because, you know, Giotto has his agenda, he's also conversing in the ChaosDAO, then you see the overlap with Kusamarian having their own sort of voting sort of agenda and their own DAO structure. They're also a media, you know, powerhouse. So there's lots of conflation of things going on, and it is really difficult for anyone on the outside to discern bias because of that, or the risks of that. So I guess the future will tell based on voting and how things emerge, whether there are distinctions. I think that's what people will be looking for.
Yeah, and this is what I said at the start as well, is I think the way to combat this a little bit is just to have multiple groups, right? Where, for example, like ChaosDAO is probably the most active community, right? And you know, you get invited by doing good stuff in Polkadot. Like you got invited because of your work in your interviews and stuff. So if there was like other groups that maybe had different invite processes or were more open, right? That had similar size, then it would be less of an issue. Like the problem is, for example, there's Poker House as well, right? Which is a community group.
Right.
Like people need a place to congregate and discuss stuff. And the thing is, so ChaosDAO from 2.5 years ago, right, started off as just a community group where we can talk about Polkadot without the moon boy stuff that you see on Twitter all the time, especially during the bull market, and like focus on like the tech and all that kind of stuff. Then over time, we just realized we like talking to each other, and through that like cohesion, we were like, okay, now we can probably maybe focus on something, which was governance. When we read the OpenGov initial document from Gav, it was pretty clear to me that we should focus on that. So there are a lot of people in ChaosDAO, and it probably does look like from the outside that there's a lot of weird stuff going on, especially because people really like putting the part of ChaosDAO in their Twitter bio, right? But there's so many people, and a lot of people think that projects in the ecosystem are like controlled by ChaosDAO because people who are part of those projects are part of ChaosDAO. But there's ChaosDAO, which is a community group, and you get invited if you're active in the ecosystem. So we invite people that might be founders of parachains, or founders of, or infrastructure people, or big governance max enjoyers, or content creators. Like we invite them all to be able to talk in like a collected space. As you've seen, there's a lot of chat all the time.
Yeah,
in ChaosDAO.
if I could just jump in there, I mean, I think it's a natural progression to have those different parties from all the, I guess, from all the different sectors of the tech evangelists. You know, that's really the premise that you started with. But I need to push back a little bit there and ask, what if there was the scenario where many of those parties were investing? What if those founders were looking for support from VCs, for example? There is a diverse range of people in the ChaosDAO, I would imagine. I haven't gone through the list, and many are anonymous anyway. But what I'm asking is, could there be a situation where some are pushing their own agenda from an investment standpoint, for example, when we know that there are several rounds often prior to listing? They're quite financially advantageous for those early entrants as well, in the sort of position that they may take in the sort of investment angle of a particular project. And then obviously we see founders who really want to push the, I guess, the technological value and the platform value, you know, through those contexts. So you get, can you see what I'm asking? Is that there might be those who are looking at it from a financial gain position and therefore want to, you know, uplift through the ChaosDAO their own, to enable them to capitalize on their, I guess, their fortune in being in part of the ChaosDAO.
Yeah, so there's a few people that have wanted to be invited, for example, and it happens a lot. Like maybe not from like a raising in a seed round, but people that have referendums up, especially on Kusama because we have a decent size on Kusama, and well, it's whenever. So before Giotto, when it was like we were number one at some point, and then Ivy overtook us, then Giotto overtook them. People just wanting to get in to basically push their agenda and try and convince people. It's why we have a rule where if you have a referendum up, we don't invite you. But yeah, there will be some benefit for anybody to be in ChaosDAO, right? Whether that's you have a referendum up, whether because you can explain yourself a bit better, whether it's like you're a team that wants some community support. It's not that you're going to get community support. It's that if you're active and can explain yourself a bit better, then it might help because it's just a big network, right? It's like 350 people. So it's a place where you can talk to a wide range of people in one collective space.
Well, do you think, given that it's a private group and you do get some flack for that as well, I've seen that, but do you think that if you're a bit more transparent about anyone who was investing, I mean, perhaps you are already, Leemo, and I should ask you that, but if there are parties who are investing in these projects and really advocating for, you know, a Giotto style approach, which you could understand. I mean, Giotto's explained he's invested in some of these projects, hasn't said which, but you can sort of assume some of them. So given that, and the possibility of trying to utilize a DAO of any kind to their own benefit, would transparency of that sort of agenda be a boon for the ChaosDAO if there were parties in there who were investing early?
Yeah, but I so outside of OpenGov, I don't know the exact benefit they would get. Of course, like if it's somebody that's invested in something and it's like, oh, this is like a really cool
well, let
project,
me help you.
blah, blah, blah,
Let me help you out. So let's say it's not listed yet. Let's say the project's not listed yet, and you know you're trying to really push the agenda of education, information, you know, all the things you need to have the best possible outcome for when it does list. You know, and let's say that they're invested very early and they're utilizing the support from the ChaosDAO or any other DAO to, I guess, support their own investment. Would transparency of that sort of approach, would that be a boon? Because we do see that Giotto's leading this now with his own approach. He's letting people know what he's in. You know, he's telling them I'm a big dot holder. I'm also in a few other projects. He hasn't shied away from that. So I guess that's the question I'm asking, because you have a tendency in the ChaosDAO to be private about some things.
I'm trying to figure out what you mean by support. So like,
so for example, like when you see things emerge on X, sometimes you see a very strong sense of support collectively. Even though everyone's an individual member, you see a lot of support for specific projects throughout from multiple members, not just one or two, but a clear majority, let's say. So my question would be, okay, that's great, because that's all about supporting Polkadot. It's all about supporting quality projects, because at the end of the day, ChaosDAO is doing the due diligence for quality. But if there are parties involved who are investing early in that project and they're in part of ChaosDAO, would transparency be a boon for ChaosDAO in that sense? Because obviously they stand to benefit from that investment.
So ChaosDAO itself hasn't invested in anything that's not very obvious.
Members of the ChaosDAO I'm trying to get to is just like, like you mentioned before about Crane and going out and doing sort of a media venture. It's no different to someone individually investing, but they're still, by proxy, collectively, we see a lot of support for certain projects.
Yeah, I'm just unsure on how you would police that. It's like, again, just because somebody's a member doesn't mean it's the whole group.
Yeah,
so
it's always a challenging
question. Like
question.
HydraDX, right?
Right.
A prime example is HydroDX. So I have a verified on-chain ID on HydroDX. I'm part of the council. So people can see how much HDX that I own. So I don't know if promotes the word, but I do like a lot of council stuff there and like share all of that information. And a lot of other members are invested in HDX as well. So there will be some push. Like people will just always say like, oh, for example, today some Twitter account posted that like HydroDX has the largest amount of XCM in and outflows, right? So like obviously people will jump on that and be like, oh look, Hydra's doing really well. But I don't know how to police that in terms of like the people that are in ChaosDAO telling them like you have to disclose your
Yes, and I don't think many
like
members would like it, but I guess to help with the like educate others how the media do it in crypto is that we see the likes of Bankless or the Block. I would imagine I think the Kusamarian eventually will do this. I would anticipate where they put up a clear disclosure statement about the different investments they make, because obviously in the interests of fair media, they do so. But when it comes to ChaosDAO, again, they don't have to do that. It's not required. It's a totally different entity system. And as you said, many members reserve the right to vote independently and act independently. But I just thought to ask you that because in the name of transparency, in the vein of OpenGov, would it be a boon if people knew, some of the interests that some members have, given that there is such a strong push for very specific projects? I see it almost every day where we see certain networks and certain people really pushing the agenda of projects, whether that be for the quality, or whether that be for their own investment, we don't know. And so more transparency could only be a good thing for Polkadot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally a big fan of transparency. So in the previous questions, I'm like trying to figure out how I would tell other people to do it. From my side, like I'm very clear about when there's something I'm involved with, like it's in my Twitter bio, or it's like one account that you can follow across all the networks, the Leemo account. You can see what I've got investments in. But yeah, I don't know how on a big scale you can police that, aside from just like
that alludes to the next question that I wasn't getting to till later, and that is, let's say that the ChaosDAO moves into a legally wrapped position where there is a legal entity there. Would that be something that would be more appropriate then, or would it not apply in that situation? Let's say.
Yeah, so the legal entity would be the entity that holds the collective pot of funds, which is, I believe, transparently. We mentioned it on our recent 2-year birthday Twitter post, like on how we get funds as a group.
Right.
But
it's a tough one. We can skip that. We'll come back to that one next time.
It is tough because I don't know how you would police individual people that might not necessarily be part of the entity structure.
It's always that interesting reciprocity between member and entity argument, which is, it'll continue forever. But thank you for trying to answer it, because it wasn't an easy question. I appreciate that, Leemo.
Yeah, but I'm really not trying to dodge the
question.
I know.
And I wasn't
I'm really trying to think of the like what.
Yes.
How would you actually do it? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I wasn't actually planning on asking it. So again, thank you for trying. We'll come back to it, and hopefully there'll be more empirical data that will help us at that time. Now, with regard to getting involved with OpenGov, you're a huge advocate. How can people get involved, whether it be from proposals to voting, whether engaging with the apps, that are available? How can they have a voice? What can they do right now in real time to be part of OpenGov?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said before, everybody's the constituent, the MP, and the lobbyist. So the very basic one is just vote, right? Regardless of how many tokens you have, as long as you're not in a nomination pool, because you can't do that yet. But just vote. Like if you disagree with something, vote nay. If you agree with something, vote aye. You can always just submit any proposal you want, and just be active on. You have Twitter or X. You've got the direction channels, you've got Poke Assembly or Subsquare, you've got the Polkadot forum. Like a lot of people, I would imagine the issues they have is they might understand that everybody's the constituent, so you're the token holder, and that the size of your vote is weighted by the amount of tokens that you have, right? They also understand that everybody's the MP, where you can propose whatever, right? They might not like what a certain MP is proposing, but it's obvious that the system's open, you can propose what you want. The bit that people seem to get stuck on is like the lobbyist part of it, right? So for example, I'm not like a massive dot token holder. I'm not the most wealthiest person in the world. But if I believe something should be like very strongly that something's I, or very strongly that it's near, use your like social network, right? Use your X profile, go in the direction channels and be like, hey, this is like really wrong. I can like say in ChaosDAO, hey, I think this is like a good one or a bad one. That's I think just comes with the territory. A prime example of this would be on Kusama very recently. There was a referendum to pay KSM to systems parachain collators. So that is basically these networks on Polkadot or Kusama, such as Asset Hub, where like USDT and USDC exist. Paying those nodes, these collators, which are basically validators, but they just submit the blocks from the parachains to the relay chain, right? The problem is they are not profitable like at all, right? So everybody running it is running at cost, right? But these systems parachains are very important to the overall success of Polkadot and Kusama. So it makes a lot of sense to pay them, like I think it's a couple of $100 a month per collator, just so they're not running at cost, so they're like paying for the infrastructure, right? I think that's very obvious. So I saw that there's one big account on Kusama that just likes near voting everything because they think it's funny. So I just raised the alarm in the Kusama direction channel. I'm like, hey guys, this is like really important. This group is going to vote. They're going to keep increasing the conviction to 6x. They're going to have this many votes. We really need to come together and all vote on this if we want this to pass, which I really believe we should pass. I'm not a beneficiary of that at all, by the way. It's just something I think is important to pass.
Right.
And eventually, like in the same day, like people did start voting on it, right? So people shouldn't be nervous to act as the lobbyist, right? If you feel like there's a lot of referendum where I'm like, yeah, whatever, but there's like certain hills that you will die on, let's say, and just really push to say this is a really good one. Like, why are we not supporting this? Oh, this is really bad. Like, why are we doing this? We need to maybe reconsider it, maybe table it again, and revise it, maybe get the cost down or whatever it is, right?
Yes, actually, it's interesting you raised that, Leemo, because even when I submitted my own proposal, I had feedback into proposal during the time in which it was listed, or what's the term when it was actually on chain? It was available for comment, and I think that was it was really interesting because you're trying to sort of negotiate, explain, and there's a lot of feedback that you get throughout that period, and it's quite stressful, but productively so, because it does help you perform at your best, do the best you can, tweak it if you need to. And even when it comes down to any other submission bit, whether it be now or in the future, you see that evolving. A lot of pressure is on those proposals as well. People think it's an easy process. It isn't.
No.
And you know that. You've seen Kusamarian go through this many times. But what about when, say, for example, a media representative, they're submitting their proposal and they're also commenting on proposals themselves? Do you think that's a bit of an issue itself? Because you're advocating for activism, which is fantastic. We want to see people really engage, but is there a limit? Should there be parties who should be neutral because of their position, including myself? I often question this for me.
It's a good question. Yeah, because I get your point. If you're like part of the broader media, you probably do want to remain a bit neutral. That's a really tough question.
Let's get back to that
really
one.
Tough question.
We'll get back. We just see some others. For example, I'll just give her a plug. So Laura Shin, she's someone I look up to in the media space in crypto. She does an amazing job for her ecosystem, the way she presents herself, and she does very much try to maintain that ambivalence. But we also see, Leemo, that now we're seeing interest in that company or in that firm moving across into Polkadot, which is fantastic for us as a collective and as an ecosystem. But at the same time, she's very staunch about her neutral position. So something we could look back at perhaps, or redress in a future interview. Now, with the ChaosDAO, I wanted to ask you directly about the rules, because I haven't heard that question asked. I think it's worth throwing it out there to you. Are there any specific rules that you think had to happen or needed to be embedded to maintain the integrity of ChaosDAO as the successful DAO it's been? And if so, what are some of those rules you want to disclose, and why are they important?
Yeah, so we can start off at like the low end, which is like moderation. So the moderation policy is pretty lax. I've said this in like Jota's chat as well. Like, my moderation policy is you should be able to say whatever you want. Obviously, there's some stuff like racism and homophobia and that kind of stuff, which is just like a no-go from you know, across the world. It should be. But in terms of being able to ask questions, and then sometimes you ask questions and you get some quite critical feedback that's like maybe a bit aggressive. Just having that open policy where you're not going to get banned for maybe saying an opinion that's not popular, or asking questions, or pushing back. But there is a limit where if you, I'll try not to swear, but if you really insult somebody that's in the group, like, there's like a limit. I think one time we had to like time somebody out for a day. I think they were a bit drunk or something. We're like, calm down, like, you know, let's sleep on it and readdress this in the future. And that's like one time in like 2.5 years, right? On top of that, it's just, I mean, I think a lot of this is on our GitHub. We have like a code of conduct thing. Like, not sharing information. Like, if somebody, like ChaosDAO, because it is a private group, some people might say opinions about other people or projects that might not paint them in the best light, let's say. Right. So, and people feel comfortable saying that because the rules are, if you leak it and you know, it gets found out that you're the one that leaked it, you get removed.
Right. Has that always been followed through? I just want to check with you. Has that always been followed through unconditionally? That if someone leaks something, that they're automatically out, or has some members done it and been allowed a warning?
So the rules, I believe, there's like 2 strikes or 3 strikes or something like that. But so, for example, I'll just tell you, I won't mention names, but somebody in the community DM'd me with a screenshot from ChaosDAO where a person there was being quite negative towards them. It's in some specific regions. In Polkadot, a lot of different regions have their own drama that, like, if you're not in that region, you don't understand the drama, right?
Right.
So this person DM'd me like, hey, this person has said negative stuff in ChaosDAO. Does ChaosDAO want to respond? I'm like, it's nothing to do with me. People could say
members,
right?
not entity.
Yeah, so it's like, so it's an annoyance. Like, why did that get leaked? Like, who did that is obviously a concern. There's been, I think it's only been like 3 times, let's say, where this has happened. And it can depend on the severity of it. So like, there was one member, or ex-member now, they just like posted screenshots of like chats on Twitter, and it's like, yeah, dude, like, that's a no-go. Then there was one person who I believe sent a chat where it was literally just their message to somebody else that then sent it to me. Right. And it's like, okay, it was their message. They were just relaying what they themselves said.
Right.
So it's like, you can't really, like, for me, it's like, you can't really get annoyed at that, but it says don't share it. So they get that first warning, right? Which is in this 3 strike system. Right. So there is levels to it, but
I can understand.
I think the rules of just it being open is like what's making it successful and why it's been around for so long.
Right. And having been someone who re-entered into the ChaosDAO only recently, thanks to you, it was very clear. I thought it was worth asking this for everyone else, but it was very clear what you sign up to in terms of, I thought of it like a bit of a resort, you know, in the sense that so rarely can you just have a bit of a opportunity to let off some steam, or just to say some things, you know, or express some things that ordinarily you couldn't, because you're under so much scrutiny all the time. You have an oasis, you know, a place where you can just have some dialogue. It's not designed to be covert or to, you know, say things under the table, nothing like that. I haven't seen anything like that, but it just gave me a space to have some freedom. But it is important, I think, that people are aware that you do have those structures in place, those rules in place. People do adhere to them. And for the most part, you're very strict as a group, you know, to react to those that don't comply. So thank you for being transparent about that. I appreciate that. Now, just one thing about ChaosDAO, and, you know, we've alluded to media generally, but I want to clarify this from you. Some people have said, and perhaps even my own misunderstanding, so it'll help me, is that the Kusamarian itself has some sort of media relationship with the ChaosDAO, meaning that some people have supposed that they are sort of the media branch, although they're independent, but they work with a common interest to support the same interests as ChaosDAO. So what do you say to people who think that, that they would regard ChaosDAO as the media front, especially when apparently some of the members of the Kusamarian have come from the ChaosDAO?
Yeah, so I can understand where the confusion comes from. So, I don't get like too negative. I always just try and correct people when they say it. So yeah, like for example, James, the host of Kusamarian, right, the main guy, he's in ChaosDAO. He's been in since like day one, I believe, when it got formed. And Crane's in there, and a few other people in there as well. There's no so for example, it's not the case that like ChaosDAO is feeding the Kusamarian things to say, right? It's nothing of that nature. So for example, a lot of people might think that because of my involvement in AAG, the Attempts at Governance show, and because people see me as like the face of ChaosDAO or whatever, which is always fun. So like, for example, my involvement in AAG is not like financially paid. Like I don't get paid by the Kusamarian. It's just because I really like OpenGov and like talk about it. There will be some like overlap. So for example, in like the Friday dumps from Kusamarian, there might be like tweets that if you look at he sometimes posts like snippets of tweets, especially in like the opening few seconds.
I've seen those.
Yeah. And it might be like one of my tweets or one of somebody else's tweets that's in ChaosDAO, right? But that's just like it's because the people in the community that are very active and normally have good things to say that probably should be highlighted in media stuff. I just think ChaosDAO because they've been invited because of their contributions in the ecosystem, right? But there's no like I don't know how to assure people more that there's no like apart from the fact that they're in ChaosDAO, the same as there's people in Zeitgeist in ChaosDAO, from HydraDX, from Asta, from Intellay. It doesn't mean that ChaosDAO somehow controls those groups. Same as there is people from Parity and there is people from Web3 Foundation that are in ChaosDAO as well. I don't think that's like a necessary secret.
I think
but it doesn't mean that we control those things.
Well, just to jump in there, though, I think that what distinguishes the Kusamarian is that they are the media entity that represent arguably all of Polkadot. So that's the reason I asked. Yeah. And also, once again, we see now this marketing push, which is another agenda sort of layered into the complexity of edu marketing that we see now. And you're an admin actually in that .AMI group. And that was done by Giotto's choice. I watched that happen. It wasn't something you asked for. But also we see Jay being the admin for different groups that Giotto has selected. And we even saw, incredibly, KC or Claudio, who was once an admin for one of those groups too. So that's another layer of complexity because we see his very specific agenda. We see you now, admin in there. So anyone from the outside would question that, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah, and I understand that. It's why I always like try to clarify it whenever it gets brought up if I see it. So for example, the Giotto AMI chat. So I got there quite early because he announced it on like a referendum. So I was like, oh, I'm going to join this and see what it was. One time I did ask get promoted just to send a really long message, which was like some instructional guide to the content creators. I can't remember what it was about. It might have been about setting an on-chain ID or something before I made the tweet. And it required admin to post a long thing. In terms of who he's promoted to admin, I'm not necessarily sure why, like how he chooses those people, but Giotto, as I think he's made this clear on videos and stuff, he's a big fan of skin in the game, right? So if you're somebody that has a lot of DOT, he trusts your opinion more than somebody else. He might be equally as qualified, equally as experienced and stuff, just because they hold more DOT, right? Because they have more skin in the game, they have more to lose. So
I believe he's even said that they're smarter. That's his opinion, and he's been very direct about that. But you are right; he has made that statement. And I guess for transparency, we appreciate that you acknowledge that you were sort of thrown into that role. It wasn't something that you asked for. But we do see other co-founders in admin roles as well, not just yourself. We see the likes of Alice and Bob or Tommy, who was in a similar situation because of his input and the quality of his input. He was sort of thrown into that role. And it's just an interesting situation because you see members of the ChaosDAO overlapping there indirectly and making people wonder why. In that light, I wanted to ask you, because obviously it's getting long in the interview, and I apologize, but with regard to VC connections, let's touch on that, because you and I have talked about this privately with regard to key stakeholders as delegates. We've talked about Ivy. Ivy represents, some parts of that represent a VC or a venture capital firm. We see SkyTail also really leading and pushing forth a strong narrative, really leading out support for key projects, both that have been listed and are active, and also those that are coming forth in the future. And then we also see Hypersphere as another example that's not so well known now, but Rob, one of the founders of Polkadot, was directly involved in supporting some of the projects that particular VC invested in. So what role to your knowledge, do VCs play in this dynamic, this situation of support, of rallying together to get more funding for other projects, to really build the capacity of the technology and to make sure that it can continue forward?
I'm trying to think of what level you want to go on. So like VCs obviously provide like some sort of runway to teams that they think are going to be successful. They lead rounds, so a team might be like a seed round at the start, right? And a VC will give them the funding to continue the work. But then VCs will use their network to like get more opportunities for that project, right? So you're correct in what you're saying. Like SkyTail's a big one in Polkadot. For example, I think Mark from SkyTail's an admin in Jota's chat. So like
yes.
Jota is very close with Mark, as far as I understand it, from SkyTail.
Yes, that's my understanding also.
Yeah, and a lot of how Jota thinks about the ecosystem or the people in it at the moment is either if you've got like tokens, then it's like then he trusts you because you've got skin in the game, or it's if his network, right, which includes Mark seemingly, if his network says, like, for example, Alice and Bob, he's like a great guy, is always educating people, is trusted by a lot of people, puts in good work. That might be a reason why, for example, Giotto, I don't know if Alice and Bob is an admin. I literally haven't looked, but if he is, that might be why, and it might be why I am. Like, I'm not
also
the most privy to that, but
myself included, I think that's logical because of networks, of that high level. But I wanted to ask you more so that going deeper into it, because we also see that each VC historically, whether it be in Polkadot or outside, has very strong connections with different, players within that space, or different parties who facilitate the overall success of projects and also of the overall eco, being Polkadot or the other ecosystems that they may represent. So how involved, to your knowledge, are the VCs, given that ChaosDAO, has its own sort of entity and many members who have interests in many projects? How involved do they get in trying to support media, for example, support even a marketing agenda like Giotto's? Because as you mentioned, there definitely is a link between Giotto and Mark, because they're colleagues at level. So beyond the VC general role, how far does it go to affect the outcomes that we all want to see for Polkadot? How far does SkyTail go, to your knowledge? Because they're not just in throwing their money in. I mean, they're right now, as my understanding is, Mark's in India, so they're all at the front line too. They're representing the media interests. They're representing the influencer interests. Because what's always interesting to me, Leemo, is that we often hear this pushback about the idea of influencer, but how many VCs are not influencers? Really? How many, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many different layers to what the VC does.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it from, I don't know if it's psychological standpoint, but if you're investing in something, then you have a vested interest in making it successful because you make more money. So, for example, like you're saying, I think Mark from SkyTail is at the I think it's Polkadot Pulse India or Polkadot Now India. I can't remember which
Yes.
one. So he is talking about Polkadot and about some of the projects he's invested in, right? I think is supporting them. So the VCs, like, it's their job to give you capital to build stuff and then to support you in multiple avenues. That can be connections with people or other teams, right? It can be with marketing and general like events and getting you to events. Maybe they help you get to events, right? So yeah, they're the ones with the money, and they have a vested interest in making the things they invest in successful by whatever ways they can do that with their network, right?
And are they active in the ChaosDAO with in terms of dialogue? Just that obviously Giotto is, but are they putting forth their comments and their perspectives on a regular basis?
So I think there's like one analyst at Skytail in ChaosDAO, but they don't really chime in too much. I think they've been on a Friday call once or twice.
Yeah, I've seen
but
Michael on
I wouldn't.
AAG. So.
Yeah, they have. Yeah, it's Michael that's there. Yeah, he doesn't like push any agenda or anything. People for the most part just want to know what's going on in ChaosDAO, right? It's like this mysterious box of people and like what's going on. I want to know. And a lot of people do that, by the way. Like a lot of founders are like really pushing to get invited, then don't talk at all. So it's
Yes,
like,
I've seen that.
yeah, it's really strange.
Yeah, I've
it's
seen
really
that for
strange.
years ago when I was invited. It was the same scenario, and I actually respected that because it meant that if I, as a media rep, if I wanted to speak with the founder, I had access through the ChaosDAO thanks to the setup, but it didn't mean that it advantaged me anymore. I still had to earn my stripes the same way and had to introduce myself. So it was the structure of ChaosDAO that I appreciated more than anything, not some sort of secret dialogue that was there. Yeah. Now, just to sort of give Polkadot a bit of a plug from your perspective, given that we've talked at large about the continuum of quality content creators or lack thereof, we've talked about projects as well. Who would you like to plug in terms of quality actor, whether it be a content creator, whether it be a project, whether it be something else? Here's your chance, Leemo. Go for it.
Yeah, there's probably a few. I'll try and narrow it down. Excuse me. Lol McShiz from HydraDX, quality actor, big ecosystem agent, only wants what's best, very transparent, especially like leading HydraDX. And this isn't a plug for like, it's just him as a person, like really pushing transparent governance and proper governance on that platform and on Polkadot as well. Then there's like guys that I think people should like watch out for. Like Pablo is a big guy. I think is Mr. Kusama on Twitter.
Yes,
he posts a lot of good quality content. He's very good. He's very energetic and wants to do more. There's guys like Goku, who posts like great threads, like really educational. And there's tons of people. But the thing that's important is there's people that are trying to like get more involved and like prove themselves, maybe because like they're not like employed by a team or something, and we should support those like smaller people, right? There's people that have been putting in a lot of hard work for a long time, and haven't like asked for anything, right? They're just like, oh, I'm gonna like grow my own name, right? They haven't like gone to OpenGov and stuff, and I think that's like important to support those
I couldn't
people.
agree more with you. I mean, we all start somewhere. You started, with a YouTube. I did the same, and we want to help those people. Honestly, I know that might be bias of me, but I don't care. At the end of the day, we want to see those people who haven't been paid, that are putting in those hard yards with technical education or edutech, whatever the agenda is. If it's quality, let the people know, and hopefully more people will be listening to that and sharing the good work that other people are doing, so that they are rewarded in some way. That's what OpenGov is for, whether it be through an agency, whether it be through proposals that stand on their own right. I wish them well. So just to recap, so there's Goku, there's Shiz or Loma Shiz, was it?
Ben.
Okay.
But
yes.
yeah, Lol
HydraDX,
yeah.
Lol McShiz, and then there's also Jimmy, Pablo, Mr. Kusama.
Jimmy Tedeschi does good work.
Yeah, and they do incredible threads that are really involved. And if anyone wants to go and look into X, you'll see some great posts from them right now, and that can be a great forum for I guess a quick entry into something specific in Polkadot, and it's also digestible because it is on X. But Leemo, thank you so much, mate, for your time. It's been a very long interview. You're the co-founder of ChaosDAO. You work currently with Nova Wallet. I'll make sure that is in the description below. You have experience as a YouTuber. And really importantly, what attracted me to this conversation was your experience in OpenGov and your advocacy for it, and your understanding and your ability to, I guess, break it down for the everyday person. You've done that today. Thank you very much for your time. Is there anything you'd like to say as a final comment, Leemo?
Just be nice to each other. A lot of people are in this space. They really want to do good things. Really try to elevate those people. And in a similar way, there's people that will just be negative constantly, and just don't engage with those people, right? We really need people that care about being here to really support them. Like, for example, Brad, I know you care about it. I care about it. There's a ton of people that care about it. Really work with those people. The onus is on us now as the token holders, especially with all this decentralization stuff coming. If you have a really good idea, but maybe you're not a technical person, just say the idea and try and get some technical people involved, right? There's a lot of stuff that I'm involved with in that aspect as well. Just push your ideas forward. It's an open system. It's for everybody. If your ideas sound, you can make it a reality, and just be nice to each other.
Well, thank you for everything you've shared today. And that key point is be nice to each other and essentially mute those who aren't here to really put forward the agenda of Polkadot Tech, because that's what we're all trying to unpack, explore, and promote. And until next time, Leemo, thank you very much once again for your time. And I look forward to speaking with you for round 2, where we delve deeper into Polkadot.
Thanks for having me.